Sir, let me welcome all of you for this webinar on climate change. Uh, I'll introduce Mr. Barara. I am actually president of CIA currently. Mr. Barara is chairman of our climate change and sustainability committee of CIA. This climate change, it is a topic of the day. Everybody is concerned about it, and we should be also be concerned about it because this is causing a lot of problems to the human life and day-to-day working. Lot of damages are occurring. We are getting cloud bursts, melting of glaciers, rising of the water level of the sea. So it is a serious problem, and again is a pollution we are facing uh, all through. So this is a topic we want to discuss on it on the climate change. I'll not waste time. I'll hand over to Mr. Barara to carry forward.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I would also like to extend my hearty welcome to all of you. Please note that I'm not using the word warm welcome, because warm is no longer in climate change parlance a recommended word. So hearty welcome is more appropriate. You would be aware that even the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has pointed out that climate emergency is a race we are losing, but it is a race we can win. As you all know, there is no part of the world which is not affected by climate change. Glaciers and ice sheets in polar and mountain regions are already melting faster than ever, causing sea levels to rise. Almost two-thirds of the world's cities, with populations of over 5 million, are located in areas at risk of sea level rise, and almost 40% of the world's population live within 100 kilometers of a coast. If no action is taken, entire districts of New York, Shanghai, Abu Dhabi, Osaka, Rio de Janeiro, and many other cities could find themselves underwater within our lifetime, displacing millions of people. Fossil fuels burning in power plants and other installations has to stop, but vested interests are a serious challenge. Only a mass movement of people, demonstrations, commitments, etc., from all citizens around the world can save us from the imminent dangers of man-made climate change disasters. It is therefore time for us to really take action, and each one of us has to play a very important role. Without taking much more further time, I would like to now introduce our first speaker, Mr. Ashok Raheja. Mr. Raheja is a well-known person in the building industry in India. He has been at the forefront of the green building and net zero movement in the country. He is the first Indian to be nominated as Vice President of the leading HVAC and our society, and has already served on the board of directors for the last 3 years. He has a tremendous expertise in MEP systems, sustainability, etc., and has led and completed over 4,000 projects. He is spearheading the green building movement in India in the capacity of Chairman Technical Committee of the Green Building of the Indian Green Building Council. He regularly contributes his time to writing standards and position papers for government bodies and technical societies. I would now request Mr. Raheja to please give his talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a minute, I'm just trying to get this.
Okay, right.
So, namaskar, friends, and thank you very much, Barara Sahab, for making the introduction. And welcome to everybody on the CAI platform. As Barara Sahab said, and as our Honorable President also mentioned, that climate change is an issue which is concerning everyone. And at this point of time, situation has become quite critical because the Earth is now facing a big threat in terms of how we have worked till date, how we have lived till date, and there are questions being asked from where do we go from here. And in this context, today the decarbonization is a big subject, and net zero building. So I want to cover this topic that we all from the building sector, what does the decarbonization means for us, and what would the net zero energy buildings, how are they when they're coming in, what would they mean for us? So I would like to speak on the changing face of our Indian construction industry in this context. Let me set the stage right by talking about first the where we are going. I'm sure you heard the news sometimes back. It came on WhatsApp messages and was being talked about all over.
एक ही था, वो भी उसी से, बस एक ही था, उससे कराया, वरना कराया कौन?
मनोज जी, आप अपने आप को म्यूट कर
सब
लीजिए।
जगह ऐसी हाल है, बुरा हाल है।
Can I request everybody to please be on mute? Right, thank you. So I'm sure you heard about the story about India touching a $4 trillion economy, and then suddenly then it came that we are still a few months away from that. All forecasts are predicting that we would touch about $7 trillion in coming years by 2030, which is not too far off, and we would be the third largest economy in the world. Now that means a lot. If you look at our or the indications that we're getting, even our Honorable Prime Minister came out with a term called Amrit Kal. He mentioned that the golden period of India has begun. And in next 2.5 decades, by the time we touch 2050, India is likely to be a developed country by that point of time. Now that's a big thing to talk about. The indicators economically that can be seen, the first of all, the indicator is our population. Population is no more looked at as a challenge, but it's also looked at as an opportunity. With 1.4 plus billion people with us, India has the requisite horsepower to go ahead and work towards. Yeah, sorry, we have too much of disturbance. I think members are not on mute, so apologies for that. So we have the requisite number of people who can actually take us into the next era of our development. Now, along with that, India also in coming years would account for nearly 22% of the global workforce, because with the population that we have, we should be able to, and the young population that we have, the average age of India today stands at about 28 years, around 28 years. Now that's a young population. That means most of these people are going to be around as we enter into a large development phase. Our youth population is also one of the largest in the world, in fact, the largest in the world. And we should look at it as a potential opportunity that could be deployed for carrying India into the next 2.5 decades of development that we are going to see. Urbanization is at all-time high. We are moving at a fast pace. Somewhere I even heard about that India is building at the rate of 1 Chicago a year. Now that's a huge construction to be done. And primarily it comes on the backbone of the fact that the urbanization is the factor which is driving it. Now, most of the developed countries in the world, if you look at their numbers, they would be close to 60 to 70% urbanized. Whereas India is nearly half of that number. That means we have a lot to cover if we are going to be a developed country in next 2.5 decades. then we have a lot to construct. And hence, the number of one Chicago a year should not be very surprising. These are the good times for the construction industry. And we can see that the construction is happening right from the infrastructure to the buildings and to entire built environment is being affected at this point of time. If you look at the global construction growth, India is forecast to account for nearly 14% of the construction growth in next decade. It's a big number. And if you look at the CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate, India would continue to be one of the highest in the world in this decade as we see, which is what gives us a good opportunity ahead. That's one side of the story, which is positive, which looks good. But on the other side, we are also dealing with climate. As we said earlier, the climate change is a reality. And if you look at the global carbon emissions, India accounts for a very large share. We may be, in terms of the per capita carbon emissions, we may be low because of the number of people that we have, and people are yet to reach that developed stage. But at the end of the day, if you look at the cumulative carbon emissions, we are the third largest in the world. If we consider the entire globe to be one planet, one Earth, and if the global warming is a reality, if the climate change is a reality, it doesn't matter which part of the world it is coming from, it is going to be impacting it. The climate change, as our chairman was saying, is leading to unprecedented rainfalls in some places, somewhere the rise in temperatures, and we continue to hear about weather change patterns which are very, very different. I was yesterday at Goa, and there it was Rakeshji, can you go on mute, please? Thank you. So there it was talked about the Goa has currently experienced a temperature of 30 degrees plus, in fact, 35 degrees at this point of time. This is one of the warmest winters they've ever seen. And it is impacting even the tourism there. We have been talking about limiting our temperature rise, the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And this is where the COP, when it was the Conference of Parties, as we say COP these days, when they were established, our goal was to limit the temperature rise of the Earth to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Some reports say that we have already touched out of 1.3 degree rise has already happened, and we are likely to touch 1.5 degree rise in next 3 to 4 years from now. So we are already beyond all the alarm bells that were spoken about. And if we continue to go the way we are going, the numbers we are talking about is about 3 to 4 degrees rise, which could be catastrophic. This is where comes the need for a drastic change to be done if we want to stay at 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, whatever you like the number to be. But please remember that every rise in temperature, every 0.1 rise in temperature is also a big challenge for the humankind and the flora and fauna that we have around us. Need not talk about the things that we see in terms of changing weather patterns. Delhi is yet to see its winters properly. We continue to have mild winters till date. And another issue that you can see from the rising energy demand that we have, very interesting pattern that could be seen was, whereas our energy consumption for lighting is going down, the reason being we were earlier using incandescent lamp. From incandescent, we moved on to CFLs, to fluorescent CFLs, and now moving to the LEDs. The amount of energy that we use for lighting continues to go down. Similarly, in water heating, we see a downward pattern because the heat pumps have made a big difference to the energy that we consume. They are able to run very efficiently. But on the other side, the space cooling requirement, the air conditioning in the built environment is going up, also being driven by the fact that we have what we call global warming happening, the rise of temperatures, and a longer use of the air conditioners taking place. It is said that nearly 70% of our power consumption will start going into the buildings in some form, whether it's industries or domestic or commercial, some form that we'll be consuming nearly 70% of our power by 2050 just for serving the needs of running the buildings that we have or the built environment that we have. Well, the interesting newspaper article that I saw was, which said that by 2037, every 15 seconds, a new air conditioner would be sold. It could be good times for the air conditioners manufacturers, the industry where I come from, the HVAC industry, it could be good times, but for Earth, for our climate, for sure, this would mean trouble. Another interesting thing that I saw was that by 2050, the amount of power that we use just for running our air conditioners is going to exceed the total power consumption of entire Africa. Now, these are crazy, scary numbers. And keep in mind that India is currently constructing. Whatever you see of the buildings right now, all around you, we are expected to double these buildings in next decade, 2-decade time. We'll have double the number of buildings all around us. On this background, the pledge made by our Honorable Prime Minister at COP26 in Paris was an important one, which has shaped our construction industry so far in the last 2 years since the time it happened, and it is going to be even more impactful in coming days. If you look at the map, there are very few countries which are aiming for 2070. Most of the countries are talking of decarbonization much earlier, anything between 2040 to 2050. 2050 is a more popular target. Given that fact, and India being part of the global network, we are now today one of the large, whether in manufacturing or in terms of the human capital that we carry, we are a big impact on the global economies. Given that fact, for us to decarbonize by 2070, I think the challenges, the pressures are going to be much higher, and we have to look at an earlier number going forward. But for today, 2070, we are definitely one of the last ones to have given that decarbonization target. Now, who's going to meet that target? If you look at it, again, 40% of the global carbon emissions are set to come from the building sector, from our construction industry. And whose construction industry is us? And that is where, if we account for the majority of the carbon emissions, and if we are talking of decarbonization as a way forward, then it is but natural is our industry which is going to see the first impact and the most powerful impact coming to us to change the way we've been doing. Another eye-opener is that 23% of the total global emissions are just coming from three materials, which is our metals and concrete, cement. And they account amount of energy that they use. They account for majority of the carbon emission, nearly 25% of the global carbon emission, which is a big number. And that is why we are now talking of both embodied carbon and operational carbon being brought into control. Embodied carbon are the carbon emissions which are linked with the product or the product before it is right from the point of extraction to the point of being brought to the site where it goes through a factory, where it is processed and comes to the site and is installed. All of that energy which is spent in bringing the product up to the site and installing it is classified under embodied carbon. And the energy consumption or the carbon emissions which take place from the point we start running the building through the life cycle of the building, which could be 50 years, is termed as operational carbon. Both embodied and operational carbon are today in the focus because the built environment is contributing to 40% of the carbon emission. Both of them have nearly the same impact. Whereas in the developed world, they are developed countries, they're looking more at the operational carbon because they've finished construction. On the other hand, in India, our challenge would remain both embodied, which is the materials that we're going to use, as well as the operational carbon. The pressures are on today, and and awareness is being given to both architects, developers, consultants, operation maintenance team to look at embodied and operational carbon. The popular categorization is the civil engineers and the architects have to worry a lot on the embodied carbon, and the electromechanical engineers and the people who are operating the building have to look at the operational carbon. But at the end of the day, both are under pressure, both have challenges which are going to come up going forward. There are industry has also already started looking at the life cycle assessments in which the embodied carbon is an important element, and one looks at it from right from the start where the material is extracted to the point where the material is brought back into the where the end of the life is seen at that. What are we going to do with the material at that point in time? The trends indicate that our cement industries, our steel industries have already started looking at that. There are the carbon capture technologies being deployed. There are end users which are looking at greener way in which the cement and the steel industry is able to produce things. I'm not going to get into details because that's not the intent out here, but there's a lot which is happening there, and many of end clients which are not demanding that the green cement and the green steel should be made available. Embodied carbon continues to be an elusive subject because there is not much data available, and that is where the data mining and the what we have popularly started emerging as Internet of Materials have started emerging there, where the data is being taken at one location and shared with each other because it's a collaborative process. On terms of operational carbon, we are seeing the rise of the net zero buildings, whether it's a net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste building. I chair the technical committee at Indian Green Building Council and was also responsible for the net zero energy and net zero water rating system. Interestingly, between 2018 is when we launched our net zero energy rating system. Between 2018 and 2020, we had just 9 buildings which went for net zero energy. Right after the point where our Honorable Prime Minister made the commitment for net zero, for going carbon neutral, in next 2.5 years' time, we saw more than 100 buildings going for a net zero energy certification, which is a 10 times increase in terms of demand for this. And this is just going to grow further. More and more, we are seeing that the corporates, the clients coming forward and demanding that they would like to go high on the sustainability scale. We are in for Industry 4.0. We've been hearing about this term, but this term is now going to become a reality. IoT, IOM, augmented realities, data mining are all the way of looking at cutting down the operational carbon and also the embodied carbon. There'll be a lot of exchange of data which is going to take place in coming years because we have to make our buildings efficient if we want to be serious about it. The path to decarbonization has already begun. If you talk to any big corporate, they talk about Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions. Currently, that's all they're looking at, Scope 1 and Scope 2, because whereas the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions only account for less than 10% of the total emissions. 90% of them sit in the value chain, which is a Scope 3. And in coming years, you will see that the sourcing of the material would be done. What we say, a green sourcing would start of the materials. That means the large players would only be purchasing materials or the raw materials from those companies who have a declared carbon footprint. We call it EPDs, and I'll talk about it a little later. What it means for developer and clients. Already, India was amongst the first country in the world to make the CSR compulsory in 2013. Right after the announcement was made for decarbonization, top 1,000 companies on the stock exchange were asked to submit an annual BRSR, which is Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report. ESG came into the picture. That 1,000 number was increased in the subsequent year, and is expected that more and more companies on stock exchange would be asked to start following that. And minded, all of that will start trickling down in coming years. Already the green finance, green bonds, and the investors are now demanding that the developers, when they take money, they look at, or they take funds, they look at developing green assets. There was a newspaper article which talked about the European Union coming out with CBAM. CBAM is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. Especially the steel and cement. The steel, even I was at one of the conference where the wire manufacturers and cable manufacturers who are exporting to Europe, they were worried a lot. Why? Because there would be a carbon tax imposed on it going in coming years if they do not have a carbon declaration out there. So you can see how the impact, we may like to believe that 2070 is far away, but the changing global scenario is going to get us into it very soon. A lot of us from Consulting Engineers Association are designers. What does it mean for us? It means that in coming years, it will become a performance-based design there. We will all be given a carbon emission number and will be required to design and operate a building on that. Already, there's a first country in the world, Denmark, which has come out with a carbon emission number. They give you a total carbon allocation, and you're required to construct and operate your building under the carbon emission number. What would it mean for the contracting companies going forward? You have to get it right the first time itself. The very fact that we love to dismantle and redo it again would mean that we have a higher embodied carbon and more carbon emissions. The advent of BIM is here. BIM is not only going to look at just as a coordination tool, but is also about getting it right the first time. The AR, VR, we should be able to superimpose our drawings onto the construction site and see if we are doing it right the first time. There are many, many tools which are available online. Modular construction would become more and more acceptable, more and more asked for. The reason is we are able to do the fittings right at the factory itself or with the least amount of wastage, again, because the embodied carbon is involved there. The concepts like 3D printing or the factory fabricated buildings would be more and more coming into the picture. What it would mean for the product manufacturers, carbon labeling is something that one can expect coming our way. Each of the manufacturer would be required to look at the carbon label, and we would be sourcing our materials not only based on price, but also on based on the carbon label and also on the based on the efficiency that is there. Finally, the shift has begun. You can see already in the last 2 years where we are going. I came across this very interesting slide from the World Green Building Council. And the World Green Building Council is a body where all the green building councils of the world are part of it. It came out with a directive, or rather a direction for the various countries, which said that all new buildings must go at a net zero carbon, the operational carbon, by 2030. And all buildings, including new and old, must turn into a net zero carbon by 2050. And I can tell you, it is making a lot of sense at this point of time. The IoT is in, the big data, AI, IoT is in, and we keep hearing about what the potentials of it is out there. We would see a lot of automation moving into our system, not because the human being or human capital is expensive. It will be driven more from the point of view of efficiency, that we are able to do the things right, coordinated, and is there. IoT, if you are in the building industry, IoT is all around us now, and more people and more corporates are talking about it. Our green footprint has suddenly started growing faster. India today is standing at the second largest green footprint in the world, with about 13 billion square feet in our country, and it is going to go much faster because of this reason. And we are now evolving from what I always say is the green rating system was given to us on the basis of design, and that is not going to be adequate. Going forward, the rating systems are going to be based on performance. They will no more be given on design, they'll be given on actual performance. And that is where the net zero systems or net zero rating systems would make an entry. Already the net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste, net zero carbon are being offered by the Indian rating agencies as well as the international rating agencies. Even our codes and standards are now started changing. The ECBC, which has driven the energy efficiency in the country, and it is mandated in 20 plus states of the country is already adopted, is mandated there. The ECBC is now moving to become a more comprehensive code. It is now going to be called Energy Conservation and Sustainability Building Code, ECSBC. I have been fortunate again to chair the working group of the ECSBC. We have prepared the final draft. It is ready, and currently the stakeholder consultation meetings are happening across India. And hopefully by early next year, the new ECSBC will be in force. And where we are talking not only about energy conservation, we have added new chapters: water management, waste management, building materials, indoor environment, commissioning, IoT. And mind it, these are the things that I spoke about a little earlier. All of this would start coming in an integrated manner in the government codes and regulations. As we talk, the National Building Code is now up for revision. NBC 2025 is in making. Already the conveners for various sections of NBC have been identified. They've been asked to start working on it. And we hope that this code will build further upon the need for decarbonization that is going to be there. I also must share a good news with you that NBC is the first code, probably the first code in the world, which included a chapter on sustainability when it came out in 2016. So we already had a framework of sustainability, which is now going to become tighter, more elaborate, to take India into the decarbonization era. The products, we can expect more efficient, labeled, world-class products coming from India, which should be able to go anywhere in the world. The building labeling programs are here. And Government of India also has, Bureau of Energy Efficiency has a star labeling program, which talks about the operational energy of the buildings, and it will someday get converted into operational carbon also. Environmental product declarations or carbon labeling of the product is also started. And there are manufacturers which have started looking at gathering the data now so that they are able to correctly label their product. I came across a company which has started even offering these services as a professional that come and will help you to label your product in terms of environment product declarations. This is something, as the last slide I'll show you. It just came to me this morning. Because of the COP28 that is going on, one is expecting the new areas in which the investments would be coming in. Buildings, water, agriculture, hydrogen, power, all of the waste, carbon management are the new emerging areas where the investments would be made in coming years. By 2030. This is where the major investments are going to go, nearly $12 trillion of revenues we are talking about. It's time for all of us to get ready for this future. It means whatever, we young or old, it doesn't matter. To stay relevant, to stay ahead of this in this fast changing world, we need to tool and retool ourselves. And we need to understand the global economics which is surrounding it and the changes that are taking place. Thank you very much. I'll end here. And thank you for this opportunity again to talk to all of you. Over to you, Barara sir.
Thank you, Ashish, for your very interesting and informative talk. I'm sure all of us will gain from the insights provided by you. I now have the pleasure to introduce the next speaker, my very dear friend, Krishan Kalra. Krishan graduated in mechanical engineering from Delhi University and worked with Indian corporate world with companies like Esso Standard, L&T Group, and the DCM Shriram Group, where we were together for some period. And he also worked as the managing director of the Indian Kitchen Appliances Major in Alsa. He has been the additional Secretary General of the apex industry body FICCI and the Secretary General of the PhD Chamber. He has also served as President of the All India Management Association, IMA, and member of the Board of Governors of IIMC Calcutta, Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. Since 2010, Krishan is doing only voluntary work in the areas of skill development, climate change, cancer care, empowerment of people with disabilities, and urban regeneration. You know, we really have a very, very competent and capable speaker in Krishan, as he has tremendous knowledge and interest in the area of sustainability. And I now have great pleasure in asking him to please give his talk. Thank you, Krishan.
Thank you very much, Arvinder. That was a very flattering introduction that you made. First of all, I'm thankful to your association, President R.S. Sharma, you, of course, and also I heard the very elegant and very eloquent presentation made by the first speaker, Mr. Ashish Rakheja. I want to start with a small disclaimer first. Whatever I'm going to talk today, there is no rocket science about it. Most of what I'm going to say is known to all of you people. You're all engineers, you're all members of the Consultant Association of India, and some of you are probably more knowledgeable than me on this subject. The subject today, climate change and sustainability. Now, although there is a deep relationship between climate change and sustainability, but I think sustainability is much more than only climate change. Climate change might be the main cause célèbre of why we are now hooked onto sustainability, but sustainability has a lot of other things. Sustainability is affecting all facets of our life. Every little action that we take generates carbon and makes our sustainability, makes our planet more fragile, and we've got to all take care of that. It affects water availability, food and agriculture, forests, urban flooding, waste management, plastic waste, construction industry, of course, Mr. Rakheja has gone over it in great detail, marine life, natural drainage channels in every city, air pollution, water bodies, life expectancy, disease, child health, you name it, and everything is a part of sustainability. Everything, it's our duty and our responsibility to take care of that. Having said that, let me first mention that climate change is not a new thing. Scientists have known about climate change for almost now 70 to 80 years. In fact, even 100 years. I've seen some papers where they talked about climate change. But what drew the attention of the world to climate change, two things happened, to the best of my knowledge. In 2007, there was a movie called An Inconvenient Truth, which was anchored by a gentleman called Al Gore, who is the former vice president of the United States of America. And also what Sir David Attenborough, the 96-year-old environmentalist, brother of the famous Richard Attenborough, who made the film Gandhi, and also a documentary called A Life on Our Planet. Now, these two things seem to have woken up the world about climate change, and just as well, because I think we were going merrily about it, that okay, nothing's going to happen. I want to share with you an amusing incident which happened about 10 years ago. I've been making these presentations. I'm sorry, today I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to chat about it. Since 2010, when I joined the Climate Project Foundation. Incidentally, Al Gore started what is called the Climate Reality. And Climate Reality has 9 country chapters in the world, one of them being India. And I am a trustee of the Indian chapter, which is called the Climate Project Foundation. That is what. So when I started doing that, this must have happened maybe in 2011 or 12 or something like that. I was to make the presentation at the convocation of one of the business schools in West Delhi. And as the students were setting up the auditorium, we were having a cup of tea with the director of the organization of the business school. And he says, Mr. Kalra, pardon my saying so, what is the big hoo-ha about this 2 degrees centigrade? What will happen if the temperature of the earth rises by 2 degrees centigrade? Believe me, friends, I was speechless for almost 2 minutes. And then I recovered and I said, sir, I'm sorry that you, a double PhD and who is molding the future of 500 children here in the business school, don't know about what will happen if the 2-degree temperature rise happens here and all that. So in the meantime, students came to call us. So I said, after the presentation, if you could give me half an hour's time, I want to explain this to you in private as to what would happen. It is catastrophic. It's not something very simple that. So after the presentation, of course, he said, I'm extremely sorry. I had not understood it. And I'm so happy that you made this presentation to our students. And I am now going to introduce sustainability and climate change into the curriculum of our business school and all that. Now, that was the level of awareness at that time. Last 10 years or 12 years have, of course, changed that. Today, everybody from 5-year-old kids to old people like me, or whichever profession in the world they are, they all know about climate change. They all know about our responsibility towards sustainability. They all know about how fragile our planet is and what is it that we need to do about it. Things have changed quite a lot, which is good, but action is still not enough. Mr. Rakheja has explained a lot of the action that construction industry is taking, but at the common man's level, I think there is still lack of the action that needs to be taken about this. What I'm going to do is, as I said, there is no point my repeating what Mr. Rakheja has so elegantly explained to this learned audience. I'm going to take a different track. First of all, I want to share with you 2 short examples as to why global warming is happening, why the climate temperature is rising. First of all is the fact that the planet Mercury is only 58 million kilometers from the sun, and it has an average temperature of 167 degrees centigrade. In contrast, Venus, 108 kilometers away from the sun, has a temperature of 457 degrees centigrade. Incidentally here, let me also mention to you the Earth's distance from the sun is about 151 million kilometers. And we've had, fortunately, for the last 650,000 years, a comfortable, life-sustaining temperature. Every temperature of the Earth is 15 degrees centigrade. Well, now it's about 16 degrees, but till 1960, when the industrialization took up speed, it was about 15 degrees, which is conducive to human life as well as to plant life. And that's how our planet has supported, the 8 billion people which are living today on the planet and all that. Now, why is Venus so much hotter as compared with Mercury, which is less than half the distance or about half the distance from Sun? Sun, of course, is the source of all heat in our galaxy, at least. We don't know much about the other galaxies and all that. The reason for that is the main reason for the nuisance that is being caused, that greenhouse gases, more greenhouse gases have gotten trapped in the atmosphere of Mercury, in the atmosphere of Venus as compared with Mercury. If I was able to show you some slide, you will see that the blue ring around Venus is much, much thicker than that around Mercury or that around the Earth. So that is the main reason why it happens. So we've got to, the more greenhouse gases accumulate in our atmosphere, the Earth will become warmer. The second example that I want to give you is, I've already mentioned briefly about it, that NASA have carried out some studies about the last 650,000 years about the carbon content in the atmosphere of the Earth and what is it now. Last 650,000 years, the carbon content in the Earth has hovered around 285 parts per million ppm. Till 1950, sorry, not 16, 1950, when industrialization picked up pace. And in these 73 years, that carbon content has risen from 285 ppm to about 425 ppm, which is the reading for today. Could be 420, could be 425, around that. The temperature has also risen, I'm repeating for the second time, which is now around 16 degrees centigrade. There are various
Hello, Krishan.
I just think it has disappeared from my screen. It has disappeared from my screen. Let me again join in 1 second.
Okay, sure. Mr. Krishan Kalra is going to log in again. I think something happened. So it's just going to take a minute or so. So he's going to log in. While we are waiting, perhaps I can take the time to share a few things with all the participants. As is very apparent, the climate change. 1 second, Krishna is calling. Hanji.
It's asking me for my password again. Can somebody tell me the password, please?
Okay. Sharma ji, Krishan is wanting to log in, but it's asking for his password. So can Sheena call him or give the password? You have tried to click on the link earlier like you did that time. It didn't ask you. Yeah, do that. Okay. So he's going to go back to that and try again. So anyway, it'll take a minute or so. Hanji.
So we take the questions for Ashish Radeja.
Achha. Okay.
Actually, I am also on mute. I don't able to mute. Okay, so it's controlled by Sheena. And Kala sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry, technology plays tricks with me at times. And so NASA have carried out some studies, as I told you, about the carbon content. Well, how they do it is that on the South Pole, they drill some ice cores, and like the rings of a tree, they are able to capture the entrapped air in those ice cores, and they're able to analyze it and find out what was the carbon content at that time and what is the carbon content now. And as I mentioned to you, that against 285 ppm, now it's hovering around 425 ppm. The temperature has also risen because there is a direct connection between the temperature of the Earth and the carbon content of that. Anyway, this was just to share with you a little bit, very briefly, the science of climate change. What is at the core of it? And now we don't need to spend more time on that. Now, I go back to what I mentioned about the sustainability sustainability touches all facets of our life. It touches the clothes that we wear. It touches the food that we eat. Where is that food grown? How is that food grown? How much of water gets into growing that food? How far is the food from us, what we call as food miles? Supposing I'm eating an apple which was grown in California. Now that obviously that apple has been flown all the way from California or shipped all the way from California to India, to Mumbai or to Delhi or wherever it may be. And that action has obviously generated a lot more carbon emission. It has generated, whether it came by ship or it came by air or things like that. How was it cooked? Was it cooked on an induction cooker? Was it cooked on a normal stove? Was it cooked on an LPG stove, or how it was done? All those actions involve energy used in growing that food, energy used in moving that food from California or from Fiji or from Brazil, wherever that little apple might have come from. So if we are to consume locally grown food and vegetables and all the fruits and vegetables, we would be helping a lot in this checking the amount of food miles that we do. Similarly, in cooking, if we are, Indians have traditionally soaked their pulses and their beans, etc., overnight before cooking them. The reason is very clear, because if we soak them, then the energy required for cooking them is far less than what it would be if we were not to soak them for boiling, etc., and all that. Now, those are the kind of things which, to make my argument that every action that we take is responsible for warming of the global and for making the earth far more fragile and all that. I go back to the clothes I mentioned. All of you must be aware that the government of Japan a few years ago banned wearing of neckties in the government offices there. Private industry has also learned from that, and they're also following suit, but there is no such rule for the private industry. The rule is only for the government offices. And what was the result of that? By banning ties in their office, they were able to raise the setting of their thermostats on the air conditioners by 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now you can imagine the colossal saving of energy if you raise in all your government offices the temperature setting, the thermostat setting by 1.5 degrees centigrade. You can imagine if that kind of a action was taken in USA or in India or in the European companies, what could possibly happen? I have nothing against wearing of ties, believe me, but I stopped wearing ties since that day. When I learned about it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I say stop wearing, I might have worn it on 1 or 2 occasions, but most of the time I discarded that. In any case, the climate in India does not really warrant use of ties. So barring the bankers and the lawyers who have to do it for their professional reasons, it's not necessary. Now, clothes have another story about. As you're all aware, the amount of water used for producing a pair of jeans is about 20 to 30 times more than the amount of water used in let's say, getting a pair of cotton trousers ready. Now, that is the kind of difference. Now, we all enjoy wearing jeans, but the jeans is a colossal waste of the water, the rare availability on the plant. Now, even so much so, not so much in India, but in a country like America or in Europe, people buy new clothes and they discard them after wearing them for 2, 3 times, 4 times and all that. India, traditionally, we've grown up in a society, someone like me who comes from a lower middle class society at that time, I grew up, we are traditionally, the clothes are passed on from one brother to another brother to another, and then to a nephew or someone else. And we keep on using the same clothes. Why do we do that? So that new clothes don't have to be produced. Production of new clothes. Sorry. Add to the greenhouse gases content. So much so that even world famous designers are now advocating that please use pre-used clothes. In fact, there's a strong movement called I love pre-used clothes. I love pre-used cars. I love pre-used watches or whatever it may be. And if we were to follow that kind of a thing, our designers and our influencers, if they were to do it, there would be a lot of saving of that. Deforestation. Deforestation is extremely important for sustainability of our planet. As we're all aware, most of the major cities, I live in Gurgaon. For example, if I look at Gurgaon, Gurgaon is losing its forest cover. All over India also, fortunately over the last 10 years, the forest cover in India has risen a little bit because the government and the industry have made serious efforts to protect the number of trees that are there. Let me here also share with you about the per capita population of trees in the world in India as compared with, let's say, some of the countries which lead. It might be a bit of a shocker. A country like Russia has 9,000 trees per capita. As compared with that, I don't know if anybody would like to take a guess. In India, the number of trees per capita is 28. 9,028. Now that is how denuded our forests are. Now this 28 can easily rise to 100 in about 10 years' time if every citizen of the country was to plant one tree every year, just one tree every year. And we were to nurture that tree and we will make sure that that tree matures. Why are we seeing so much incidence of urban floods in our cities? There have been floods right from the top. If I take Srinagar, in Delhi and Gurgaon, of course, there are floods there every day. Chennai has seen floods. Bombay has seen floods. Almost every major city in the country has seen floods. Why does that happen? The main reason for that is that every big city, the natural drainage channels of that city, I think Mr. Rakheja and other engineers involved in construction industry will know about it. They collude with the municipal, with the civic authorities, and all those natural drainage channels get covered with valuable real estate which comes up on those. Water bodies, same thing happened with the water bodies. I come back to Gurgaon again. Gurgaon had 13 big water bodies, and 2 years ago, we were left with zero. Not one water body was there because all the water bodies had been filled with construction waste or whatever it may be, and very valuable real estate had come up on those. Then some organizations have come up to save the water bodies, and they've been successful in reviving two water bodies. One is a large Sikandarpur water body, other is the Wazirabad, and now they're working on 3 or 4 other bodies, revival of them. But revival of them means regenerating the drainage channel. Now, wherever real estate has come, obviously it can't be done, but then they create artificial drainage channel by pipes, etc., which take the rainwater, overflow of the rainwater into those water bodies, and they are able to revive those things. Plastics. I don't think I need to talk about plastics because plastics, which started as a boon, sometime in the late 19th century, is today become a bane for the world. There are plastics flowing in the Pacific Ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, which are as large as some of the countries in the world. And nobody is paying, well, I wouldn't say nobody is paying, they are paying attention to it, but that is the kind of, plastic waste that ends up in the ocean, and that ends up in the landfills of the countries. I think our golden rule should be reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce your use, reuse whatever you can reuse, whether they are effects of the domestic effect or whether they're clothes or whatever it may be, and recycle, you compost it or recycle it, whatever way you can do. You know, what has happened to the society in the world in general? Once again, not so much in India, but more in the affluent countries, we've become hoarders. Our appetite is unending. I find Mr. Ravinder Barara wearing a nice new shirt, and I say I must go to the supermarket and pick up a shirt like that. When I go to the supermarket, in addition to picking up one or two shirts, I find some store is selling good kurtas, some store is selling cardigans, some store is selling some other products and all that. And I end up filling up my basket and come home. I wear those new clothes once, twice, maybe 4 times, and then they're consigned to the back of the wardrobe and I don't see them. Believe me, when this thing started, I did a stock taking up my wardrobe. And I was quite shocked that there were a lot of clothes which I had not used for 1 year, even 2 years or 3 years I had not used them. Now, what is the point of having those lounge suits, or shirts, or shoes, or watches, or whatever it may be, which if they're going to remain behind at the back of my wardrobe and all that. You know, we've got to get rid of that urge to buy more and more and more. And we've got to sort of try and, as I said, we try to learn to live with less. And that would be a salvation for the world. There are many other things that one could talk about it, but I don't think I will have the time. So I will try to finish this in the next 5 minutes. I'll do that. There are many things that we can do. Again, I'm talking from a layman's point of view. I mentioned about reduce, reuse, and recycle. You know, to put it in other words, I think we've got to save food, we've got to conserve food, we've got to conserve energy, and we've got to conserve water. I can never forget my visit to Bhopal in 1981, where I was to have a meeting with the engineer-in-chief of the water department there. They wanted us to set up a small factory there to manufacture the world-famous India Mark II deep well hand pumps. At the end of the meeting, the gentleman asked me, Mr. Kalra, have you actually seen one of your pumps in a rural setting where they're installed? I was ashamed, but I said, sir, no, I see them only in my factory and in our laboratory and all that. We test them and all that. He says, I'm taking you to the nearest pump installation here. So we got into a Jeep, which was a UNICEF Jeep, and we drove about 7-8 kilometers out of Bhopal on the outer stretches of Bhopal. It was those who are familiar with Bhopal would know that it's a hilly terrain. As our Jeep was climbing up that mountain and being a famous, being a common sight for those villagers, by the time we reached there in the next 5 minutes, almost half the village had gathered in that little. It was a village of only 600 people. And I think 400 to 500 people were there already. There was this pump of ours with some vermilion marks on that. They'd written Om with the vermilion. They'd made a swastika. They had things like that. There was a garland on the pump and there was joss sticks had been lit there, those agarbattis. So we walked up to that pump and there was this old man. This chief engineer told him, Baba, ye us company ke saab hain jinhone ye pump yahan pe lagaya hai. Before I knew what was happening, this guy fell on my feet. I felt very, very embarrassed because he was an older man. I'm talking of 40 years ago. I'm talking of when I wasn't that old. So I lifted him from the shoulders and I said, Baba, aap aisa kyun kar rahe hain? Aap to hamare buzurg hain. Ye theek nahi lagta hai. He says, Babuji, ये आपके लिए हमने नहीं किया है. ये जो पंप के ऊपर आप देख रहे हैं, धूप अगरबत्ती जल रही है या टीका लगाया हुआ है या माला डाली हुई है, हम तो ये रोज करते हैं. भगवान की पूजा के बाद हम इस पंप की पूजा करते हैं. चलिए मैं आपको लेके चलता हूँ. मैं दिखाता हूँ कि इस पंप के आने से पहले हमारे गांव में पीने का पानी कहाँ से मिलता था. Then suddenly he turns around and points to a few women standing there and he says, आपके ख्याल से ये लड़कियों की क्या उम्र होगी? So it was a tough question. How would I know? But I said, 30, 35, 40 के करीब होंगी ये लड़कियां. He said, इसमें से कोई भी लड़की 25 साल से ऊपर की नहीं है. बेचारी सारा दिन पानी ढोती रहती है जोहर से और बूढ़ी हो जाती है. हमारे गांव के लड़कों को कोई लड़की नहीं देता है क्योंकि वो कहते हैं कि वहां जाएगी क्या करेगी, पानी भरेगी, सारा दिन वो पानी भरेगी वहां पे जाके. Then he got with us into the Jeep and we drove almost, I think, 2 to 3 kilometers we drove over undulating rocky land and we reached this rain-fed pond. He says this was our only source of water till 2 years ago, till 1 year ago when this pump was installed. And our girls will have to fetch water from there 2 times or 3 times or 4 times a day because we needed that water for our animals and for all of us and all that. Believe me, that night I was unable to sleep. People like you and I take water for granted because we've always grown up in a situation when you turn the faucet, you get hot water, you get cold water, plenty of water is there, and we never paid any attention to if we were wasting water and all that. After that, I became a self-appointed canvasser about preservation of water, about conservation of water and all that. And I must have mentioned this 1,000 times to anybody whom I see, whether it's in a conference where a guy is opening his fresh bottle of mineral water. And I have even been rebuked because my neighbor had opened a bottle. There was a bottle lying in front of me also. I said, sir, can I pour some water from your bottle into my glass? And he says, why? Don't you have your own bottle? I said, sir, I don't want to waste because caterers will come and pick up these bottles and they'll throw them into knowledge. Now that's water conservation. Second is food conservation. Those of you who have eaten a Kashmiri Wazwan meal, which I think represents the heaviest wastage of food in the world I've ever seen. We all waste food on weddings and parties and things like that, but the amount of food wasted is colossal on the Kashmiri Wazwan. There are 17 courses of a Kashmiri Wazwan meal, and I've attended one of those. 4 people sit around a central, you sit on the floor and you eat Wazwan. A big platter is brought with a mountain of rice in between and 1 or 2 kinds of meats and vegetables and all they are brought in. So 3 of us were sitting there. Invariably, they have a local 4th person to guide you through that meal. So we started piling up, filling up our food. No spoons are there. You eat with your hand there traditionally. And he says, go slow. There are going to be 16 more platters coming. I said, uncle, what are you going to do with this? What is happening? He had no answer. He just said, ठीक है, वो ले जाएंगे, नौकरों को दे देंगे, ये करेंगे, वो करेंगे. And this went on for 17 courses because there were different kinds of meats and vegetables and things like that coming with the tribe. So that's the kind of waste that we've got to use. We've got to be very, very judicious. I know all of us in the cities are very particular about it, how much food we are picking up and whether we are finishing everything in our plate or we are not doing that. But a lot of people still don't do that. And third is wastage, checking wastage of energy, conserving energy and all that. I don't think I need to talk more about energy because all of you are aware about what happens when we waste energy. We've got to move to renewable sources of energy. There is a lot happening on the solar and wind power and all that. And fortunately, the cost of solar panels, the solar PVC as we call them, photovoltaic cells, which are primarily used for making solar panels. The cost of these solar panels in the 1980s, when I first visited the US to visit some of the manufacturers of solar panels, was about $10 per peak watt. That a small panel which could produce 1 watt of energy would cost $10. In comparison, the cost of the conventional source of energy in India was $1 per peak watt. Today, fortunately, that $10 has come down to less than $1 for the solar panels, and that is why you see fast growth of the solar panels. Or wind energy for that matter. Use of LEDs, which the earlier speaker mentioned about that. And particularly, all I want to add is that we should try and use non-flicker type LEDs, which consume a little less energy than most of the LEDs are flicker type energies and all that. Only, unfortunately, the availability of non-flicker LEDs is not as great as it used to be. all screens use LEDs. It should use LEDs and not LCDs. Most screens are LCDs and all that. As far as back to water, I think we've got to recycle all sewage water, all industrial effluent. And I want to share one more example with you. You know, I was visiting in the year 2000, I was visiting this company in Germany called Bayer Chemicals. We were a large delegation led by Suresh Prabhu, who was the minister at that time, Minister of Chemicals and Fertilizers. And Bayer showed us their fabulous plant. And at the end of it, as we came out of one of the buildings, there was a channel of water flowing there. The channel was about 30 feet wide and maybe half a kilometer or so long, and a shallow channel, maybe 2 feet or so deep and all that. So he walked along that and we asked him, what is this water channel is looking? He says, I will tell you at the end of the channel. This is our wastewater from the plant which is coming and all that. When we reach the end of the channel, the guy takes out a water cup, a paper water cup from his pocket, fills it up from there and drinks that water. Now, can you imagine chemical plant effluent over that half a kilometer or 2/3 of a kilometer had become so clear that it had become potable water. Now, we may not be able to go to that extent of effluent treatment, but we've got to do as much as we can that. We've got to start using waterless urinals. We've got to go back to the old tradition of double plumbing. Double plumbing, you would all remember in New Delhi, even now in Lutyens Delhi, it happens that there is a plumbing of what is called kacha pani, which is used for gardens and things like that. And there is pakka pani, which has been filtered, which has been treated, and which is good for drinking and all that. We waste water in washing cars, driveways, we water our lawns, we waste our floors and all that, we waste food, we do not compost enough food. We are doing carbon sequestration, but much more has to be done. We have to plant millions of trees that have to be done. And now, of course, the corporates are getting into it in a heavily. I think Ashish Raheja mentioned something about some of the welcome moves. There are more that I have learned about. US and China, the two biggest polluters in the world. And I'm not talking of absolute value only. Even on a per capita basis, now have started since in July 23, mutual chats about it as to how they can collaborate about this and all that. Then mid-July, France made an offer to people who would reuse their clothes and reuse their shoes. France as a country is giving, they're giving some incentive to people who will do that. Most corporates are now doing that. ESG audits are happening very seriously. They're taking about it. And, a lot of things are happening. And let's hope that we will not face again tragedies like Uttarakhand and Sikkim, the Teesta Dam collapse, and Chennai and other things that I mentioned Chennai because it happened on 2nd of December, the disastrous cyclone which had happened. So those are the kind of things we've got to protect against. Hill towns carrying capacity has to be taken care of. We don't have to build there more. And the last point I want to make is that India became independent 76 years ago. But in those 76 years, we have not created new cities. We have created only 4 new cities that I am aware of. I'm aware of the city Bhubaneswar, Gandhinagar, Chandigarh, and probably smaller cities like Dwarka and Rohini and all, which are around Delhi. We should have made 600 new cities or 500 new cities we've done. Our cities cannot take any more people. Either we divert people, and the only way is to create sources of income in our villages and all that, which is a big job which can be done. And we should go back to much more use of millets, which require much less water than. Well, thank you very much. I must put an end. We are getting to almost 5 o'clock there, and I'm sure the organizers would have other programs to do that. And thank you for bearing with me. I'm done, Arvinder.
अभी हो गया ठीक है
I'm done, sir.
Thank you very much, Krishan. That was extremely interesting, and your examples which you gave are very, very interesting. And I could see the remarks from some of the participants in the messages that we must follow what Mr. Kalra says. So you have also got a fan force out of this webinar. So once again, thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to open the floor for questions and answers. So you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can raise a flag and then we will come to you. So please feel free to ask any questions. While we are waiting, Krishan, I'd like to ask a question while
Please.
the participants get their thoughts together.
Please go ahead.
You know, you mentioned about the climate change initiative. Now, tell me, how do people get involved with the Climate Reality Project if they want to participate in that? What do they do? How can they participate in the Climate Reality Project?
What I will do is, I will send you the website address of the Climate Project Foundation, and you can circulate that among your membership. They can get in touch. We have a country manager here, who this gentleman called Aditya Pundir, who would tell them how is it, what is it that they can do. We work on volunteers, and I'm sure if they are able to help volunteer, so I will send you that link.
Okay. So do we have any questions from all the participants? I know the talks have been very informative, and perhaps there's not much to ask, but if you do have, don't hesitate. We will appreciate any questions from the floor.
Mr. Barara, if you
I'll ask
please-
Sheena to unmute everybody. So I think
Mr. Barara and Mr. Sharma, you're welcome to post my email ID also on your site, and I'll be very happy if anybody has any questions. I'll be very happy to answer those.
Right. So, Sheena, can you unmute everybody, please?
सर अनम्यूट किया हुआ है.
Okay. Okay. There are actually 24 in chat. Some messages are there. I don't know whether we can read it, or they can ask the questions if they want. These are the questions.
Sir, thank you, Krishan sir, Ashish sir, and Barara sir, for a good session regarding to developing country like India. सर मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है, बहुत सिंपल क्वेश्चन है. एक्चुअली इंडिया जो ग्रोइंग कंट्री है सर, क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में मोर देन जो इन्वायरमेंट में स्टडी करते हैं, जो इस फील्ड में रिलेटेड है, उसको तो इशू है. पॉलिसी लीगल मैटर जो आता है उसमें भी आता है, लेकिन सर 80% पॉपुलेशन जो है उसको कुछ पता नहीं है जो क्लाइमेट चेंज क्या हो रहा है, नहीं हो रहा है. जैसे सर ने बोला कि हम बिल्डिंग कंस्ट्रक्शन करेंगे तो आने वाले 30 ईयर्स में 20 ईयर्स में उससे ये होगा, लेकिन सर अवेयरनेस पब्लिक के बीच में अवेयरनेस कैसे लाया जाए? मेरा क्वेश्चन है सर, जो ग्लोबल क्लाइमेट चेंज है या ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, इसका पब्लिक अवेयरनेस सब जानता है ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, लेकिन पब्लिक तक सर वो पहुंच नहीं पा रहा है.
आपने एक बड़ा सेंसिटिव पॉइंट टच किया है. At the bottom of all this effort is dissemination of information. मैंने खुद अपने प्रेजेंटेशन में कहा था कि अभी तक भी बहुत सारे लोगों को ये अवेयरनेस ही नहीं है कि क्लाइमेट चेंज और सस्टेनेबिलिटी कितने इम्पोर्टेंट सब्जेक्ट है. नंबर 1. नंबर 2 कि वो क्या कर सकते हैं, हर आदमी क्या कर सकता है. हर आदमी को, एक तो अगर हर आदमी को ये इंफॉर्मेशन हो जाए कि ये क्लाइमेट चेंज फॉर रियल है और उस क्लाइमेट चेंज में ह्यूमन एक्शन बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है, तो वो फिर ये कर सकता है. छोटी छोटी चीजें हैं जो हर इंसान कर सकता है. मैंने कुछ सारी चीजें मेंशन की हैं, और भी बता सकता हूँ। पानी को सेव करना है, एक ड्रॉप भी पानी वेस्ट नहीं होने दीजिए। पानी दरिया से या लेक से जब तक आपके टेबल पे पहुंचता है, उसमें बहुत सारी एनर्जी लगती है। पहले उसको ड्रिल किया जाता है, फिर उसको ट्रांसपोर्ट करने के लिए या वो आएगा टैंकर में आएगा या पाइपलाइन के थ्रू आएगा, बहुत सारे पंप इन्वॉल्व होते हैं। दिल्ली जैसी जगह में अगर आप रहते हैं तो आपको पता होगा कि तकरीबन हर घर में, हर मिडिल क्लास घर में 2-2, 3-3 पंप लगे होते हैं। पहला तो ऑनलाइन पंप लगा होता है कि जो कारपोरेशन का जो पानी आ रहा है उसको मैं सबसे पहले खींच लूं अंदर, मेरे पड़ोसी के पास पहुंचने से पहले मैं उसको ले लूं। उसके बाद अंडरग्राउंड टैंक होता है हर घर में, वहां एक पंप लगाया जाता है उसको ओवरहेड टैंक में ले जाने के लिए। फिर ओवरहेड टैंक में से पानी आता है, और कई में ऐड होता है। कई बारी अगर उसमें आपको वाटर सॉफ्टवेयर यूज करना है, बहुत सारी सिटीज में करना पड़ता है, तो उसके लिए और पंप उसमें लगता है। अगर आपको शावर को प्रेशर नहीं आता है तो प्रेशर पंप लगते हैं शावर्स के बीच में। मैं आपको एक और एग्जांपल देता हूँ। नहाने के लिए हमारे पुरखे कैसे नहाते थे? हमारे पुरखे आधी बाल्टी पानी और लोटा लेके उससे नहा लेते थे, क्योंकि 10 लीटर पानी काफी होता है इंसान की बॉडी को पूरा अच्छी तरह साफ करने के लिए। हम लोग अगर जकूजी, बाथटब तो छोड़ दीजिएगा, हिंदुस्तानी लोग बाथटब तो ज्यादा यूज नहीं करते हैं। अगर एक अच्छा प्रेशर शावर यूज करें या जकूजी यूज करें, 100 लीटर 150 लीटर पानी वेस्ट हो जाते हैं हमारे नहाने में। एटलीस्ट मैं तो कुछ सालों से वापस चला गया हूँ बकेट बाथ लेने के लिए। मेरी उम्र पे वैसे भी सेफर है बकेट बाथ लेना, बैठ के नहाना, लेकिन वो अभी हुआ है। लेकिन उससे भी पहले मतलब नॉर्मल शावर भी अगर मैं घर में यूज करता था विदाउट प्रेशर शावर, तो 30, 40, 50 लीटर पानी तो वेस्ट हो ही जाता था। अब आप अंदाजा लगाइए, हिंदुस्तान में मैं समझता हूँ सिर्फ 10% लोग होंगे जिनको शावर की लग्जरी मिलती है। इससे ज्यादा लोगों को तो शावर मिलता नहीं है। वो बाकी तो गरीब आदमी तो नहाता ही वैसे है, थोड़ा सा पानी भर के उसमें नहाता है। अगर 10% पॉपुलेशन इंडिया की 20 या 25 या 30 लीटर रोज के नहाने में, और इंडिया में कम से कम 1.5 बारी तो दिन में नहाना ही पड़ता है, क्योंकि गर्मियों में 2 बारी नहाना पड़ता है, पसीने से आदमी दुखी हो जाता है नाल नाल। आप अंदाजा लगा लीजिए कि कितने बिलियन लीटर्स वाटर का यूज, मेरे पास इस वक्त फिगर नहीं है, एक साल में वो हो जाएगा। खाने का जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, हर एक चीज खाने में, आप दाल खा रहे हैं या लौकी खा रहे हैं या आलू खा रहे हैं या सेब खा रहे हैं या संतरा खा रहे हैं, उसके ग्रो करने में, उसको ट्रांसपोर्ट करने में, उसको कोल्ड स्टोरेज में रखने में एनर्जी यूज होती है। अगर उस एनर्जी को हम कम कर सकें, और ये चीजें हैं, मैं तो आपको बहुत सारे एग्जांपल दे चुका हूँ। सुबह जब सैर करने को निकलता हूँ तो मैं देखता हूँ कि मेरे पड़ोसियों के ड्राइवर बड़ी बड़ी होज लेके, 1 इंच की 1.5 इंच की होज लेके कारों को धो रहे होते हैं, अपने ड्राइववे को धो रहे होते हैं, सामने सड़क पे धो रहे। मैं कहता हूँ बेटा ये मत करो, आधी बाल्टी पानी ले लो और अपना वो पोछे से उसको साफ कर लो गाड़ी को। तो कई तो शरीफ आदमी बोलते हैं अंकल जी फिर नहीं करेंगे। दूसरे होते हैं आपको क्या तकलीफ है, हमारे मालिक का पानी है, उसका ट्यूबवेल है, उसकी बिजली है, आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम है, इससे हम करते हैं, ठीक है। तीसरे होते हैं मेरे को कुछ नहीं कहते हैं, लेकिन जीव में अपनी पीठ मोड़ता हूँ तो कहते हैं बुढ़ा पागल है, रोज यही कहता रहता है। अब ये अवेयरनेस अगर थोड़ी सी हो जाए तो मतलब हम, एक तो जब आप गाड़ी को पानी से धोते हैं, एक तो इन केस आप कार के पेंट को भी डैमेज कर रहे हैं ज्यादा उसको रगड़ के करने के लिए, और दूसरा जरूरत है ही नहीं, मट्टी होती है, पहले उसको ब्रश से झाड़ लीजिएगा और उसके बाद थोड़ा सा गीला कपड़ा करके उससे कर लीजिएगा, काफी हो जाता है। वैसे भी गाड़ी जब जाएगी महीने 2 महीने 3 महीने के बाद सर्विस के लिए जाएगी, वो धुलेगी अच्छी तरह, वैसे भी धुलेगी, पॉलिश होगी, सब कुछ होएगा। तो ये छोटी छोटी चीजें हैं, ये अगर हर आदमी भारत का करना शुरू कर दे तो प्रॉब्लम काफी सारी सॉल्व हो जाए। बड़ी चीजें सर,
इंटरेस्टिंग है,
बड़ी
आपने
चीजें।
कहा कि
थैंक यू सर।
आपने बात की इसके बारे में पानी की। मैं अभी सैटरडे को औरंगाबाद में था जहां मैं लेक्चर दे रहा था इस सस्टेनेबिलिटी पे और कार्बन पे, तो वहां मैं वाटर कंजर्वेशन की बात करते थे। बोले साहब कंजर्वेशन तो बात की बात है, पहले पानी आए, तो हमें तो एक हफ्ते में एक बार पानी आता है, हफ्ते में एक बार पानी आता है हमारे पास। तो सो वी हैव सिटीज में, आपने बहुत अच्छा कहा कि वी हैव सिटीज जहाँ पे आज की डेट में पानी खत्म हो गया है। बैंगलोर जैसी जगह में जहाँ पे हमारी पे इतनी रेनफॉल होती है, सिटी ऑफ लेक्स कहलाता था, वहां पे आज वाटर की किल्लत हो गई है। बिल्कुल 4 घंटे पानी आता है कुल मिला के नल में, और वो टैंकर में पूरी सिटी चल रही है। कुछ लोग तो कहते हैं बिकम अ डे जीरो सिटी। डे जीरो का मतलब वो है कि वो सिटी जहाँ पे पानी रन आउट हो जाएगा। सो विद दैट काइंड ऑफ चैलेंजेस लूमिंग, आई थिंक क्लाइमेट चेंज एक इशू है, बट ऑल ऑफ दीज आर रिलेटेड, इंटर रिलेटेड इश्यूज, जो कि हमें साथ साथ टारगेट करने हैं। जैसे मैं आपको कह रहा था कि बिल्ट एनवायरनमेंट इज गोइंग टू डबल अप। आज जो आप देख रहे हैं उसका डबल होने जा रहा है, और सारे प्रिडिक्शंस जा रहे हैं उस एरिया में। जितना कंस्ट्रक्शन आज हम कर रहे हैं, इट्स समथिंग दैट वी हैव नेवर सीन अर्लियर। एंड अगर यही अर्बनाइजेशन का रेट रहा, जिसका मतलब हमें शावर से ही नहाना है और होश से ही अपनी अगर गाड़ी धोनी है, अगर ये हमारा अर्बनाइजेशन होगा, तो वी हैव अ बिग चैलेंज ऑन आवर रिसोर्सेज। I was reading a book, बड़ा interesting है ये, I think for everybody's understanding. I was reading a book which said that effect of climate change will be felt maximum in a country like India, because हमारी जो rivers हैं वो snow fed rivers हैं, और अगर वो snow ही नहीं होगी तो rivers कहाँ होंगी? And migration is going to happen. The population migration is going to happen in our country the maximum. So we are expected to go through that impact too. So it's high time that we start looking at things little holistically and responsibly. Yeah.
Sir, I have a question. Hello, can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm N.K. Sethi. First, I wish to thank all of you, Mr. Ashish, Mr. Kalra, Mr. Brara, and the organizer, Mr. Ramashankar. It has been a very interesting and very educative session. Now, I have a suggestion and an observation. I'll start with the suggestion that a lot of people are asking that they are not aware, and how to make people aware. Now, I am giving you an observation that my granddaughter, she is in class 9, and she is getting projects in Mothers International School to write on environment and to find out information and to give suggestions, and then they are debating. They are having inter-school debates. So these kind of things, if in schools and colleges, like one of us or either together we can hold sessions wherever possible. So that is the age where the children, when they reach home, they would tell their even drivers not to waste water like washing. They will tell their parents that not to waste water while bathing. And all these things can be reared up right from the beginning. So that's the right stage. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to convince people. Like we as professionals, we understand and we can say and convince people, but most of the masses, they raise questions. Like a gentleman raised a question, like Mr. Kalra was saying that a well-educated PhD person, he was asking that what would 2-degree rise in temperature affect? Now we see, we are aware. So children are being probing to either to Google or anywhere. They are finding, they tell me, they come running to me, Dadaji, please see what has happened in that ocean. The fishes are dying, animals are dying. What is happening to the world? It is our world, we must save. They are talking like that. Then I have one observation that in construction sites, I used to see in the last 2 decades in the capital or NCR area, metro construction people have used a lot of prefabricated construction. And they have their yards much away from the areas where the actual construction or fabrication or erection is taking place. So that kind of pollution during construction was never felt in Delhi. If this can be a part of one suggestion or solution can be enforced, that wherever, like the ready mix concrete, that is not mixed on site. So none of the base materials starting from cement to grit or anything is required to be brought to the site. So these are the kind of things which just came to my mind. And regarding Kalraji, you had given an observation of per capita number of trees in Russia and in India. See, Russia has lost a lot of population in the two wars, and they have a negative growth rate. We all know. Only 2-3 days ago, President Putin requested all women in Russia to have at least 8 children. So they are raising this thing, and they're automatically their per capita, you know, in their vast growth of wood, they are the biggest exporter of wood, and there's no ban on cutting of wood in country like that. But here, our population growth is affecting each and every of these things, and our per capita figures, which we quote in worldwide conferences or wherever we measure. So that section has unfortunately, since many decades after the emergency, it has been totally neglected. And all our per capita and population, naturally, the transitory population coming to cities, that is also affecting the growth. All our planning goes haywire when we have planned sewerages or water or city supplies, or cities are being designed. So when there's a migratory population all the time coming and settling, every day there new people are coming. So this is a human issue, but somebody somewhere has to take it up.
Thank
And
you.
I'd like to thank you
Thank-
a lot.
Thank you. So, any other comments or questions? I would just like to add to some of what has been said very briefly. I think some of the people were raising the point that what is it that we can do to help reduce the impact of climate change? And I think we all can do a lot. Simple things like walking nearby. If you have to go to a nearby market which is less than half a mile, walk rather than take the car. You know, and as Krishan also said, tell your driver, or if you are getting car washed, don't do it through a pipe. Try and use for showers as well as, you know, a pail of water and a mug. Then also, I think electricity use can be curbed by making sure that in rooms where there's nobody, electricity should be put off. Now, that is not done in the so-called affluent households, but we all, whether we are affluent or middle class or lower class, we all have a responsibility to reduce the energy usage. So all of us should attempt to do that. A very important other thing is that those who have not started using solar panels on their rooftops or wherever should do that. I have done it in my house in New Friends Colony. I have done in my office in my environment division in Sector 6. And I tell you, I am getting actually credit from the electrical company from my house, because I use less energy than what I generate on my rooftop. And of course, it's not only an economic advantage, but it's also an advantage that, you know, one is helping the environment and one is trying to help reduce climate change. So we can, you know, apply our minds. If we haven't started using solar energy, we should start using that. You know, lights in the rooftop and garden, instead of using that, use solar lights. That is something which is nice and can be done. Now, you know, a list of what all can be done for water, for electricity, for various aspects of one's life, I've tried to capture in a website called greenpledges.com, www.greenpledges.com, and it's something which is as a part of contribution to society, that to encourage people to follow that. We all know what all mostly is to be done, but we don't have a checklist. So if that is followed, it will really very much help. Thank you. And now I would request the President for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Barara Sahab. We had a very educative talk by two experts. Mr. Ashish and Kishan Karlaji. They gave insight of what is happening due to climate change and also the practical solutions also. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. These are the words. Everybody can use it and reduce the consumption. See, I have come up from the village. I know how we were using water, and but everybody has to do that. So a lot of consumption can be reduced. What we are wasting actually is not the wasteful use of everything should be avoided. Then we can contribute about it. Other thing is Kala Sahab, Barara Sahab, what I said is that outcome of today's talk, lot of suggestions have come. We can list out and then circulate to all the members of our association, to others also, so that they can follow it in their day-to-day use. So let's make a beginning, and then this can follow up in different groups, WhatsApp groups, so that some message should go. Let's make a beginning on it.
Sir, I have one suggestion, President, sir. This is
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Harshvardhan. Sorry to interject, but I just wanted to suggest a very good takeaway from this one is for CEI. CEI can interface with schools. That is a huge thing I learned today, that persons like Mr. Kalra are very inspirational. And if we can form a sort of a small movie and go to the different schools, and Mr. Brara can take the lead from our CEI, we can make a CI type small movie, and that can be screened, and we can volunteer to go to schools and have a panel discussion with the students, and something like this can be developed as you first screen this and then we have a debate, you know. If so, CI could come up with an educational sort of movie to raise the awareness of school children.
Let me mention here that the Climate Project Foundation India has a very ambitious program called the Green Campus Program. And we have already converted a couple of hundred campuses of the schools, different schools, into green campuses where they are positive on water, positive on energy and all that. So we are trying to do, we've done most of this work in Maharashtra, we've done, and in NCR, but we're trying to extend it all India basis also. That's a great idea, because children, if they learn at a young age, relatively young age, then the next generation will really take the situation in hand. Only thing is that generation, which is today, let's say between 5 to 15 years old, may not have, as Mr. Dakheja mentioned, may not even have enough water for survival, unfortunately. But that is the best way to teach, really.
So very good suggestions by Dr. Harshvardhan, and I think we should.
Sir, one point, sir. Just 1 minute, sir. Can we then, Kalra Sahab, can we extend that further? That we can, CI and your foundation can interface, and we can, because CI is also an all India body, and can we take this a little further from the educational point to children and raising the debate and awareness?
Any time I mentioned earlier, I'll share the website address with Mr. Barara. I can also share the telephone number of our country manager here, and we can certainly go ahead about this.
Excellent, sir.
So we take up this with the environmental committee and through the CIA academy. These two are there. We have got CIA Foundation also. We look at it, which way we can do better. And this is a good idea. We have to spread the need, what is awareness. Awareness has to be spread, then things will come. Because we have to make some contribution CIA can make out of this seminar.
Thank you. Thank you,
good
Dr.
to see that a
Subbarao.
number of our senior members from the governing council of CIA, they are attending for the full time, and very senior as well as from all levels. We have got the participants, and it was quite useful. We wanted to have the maximum participation. So I am very happy with this webinar, and we'll organize such type of the educative webinars in future also. Thank you very much. I think with this we'll close this.
No, I would
You
like
want to say something?
I would like to On the agenda is vote of thanks by me, so don't take away that
Okay.
privilege, because I have to thank you also. But before that, I just want to say there were some very good suggestions in the chat box. So I would like to request the CEI Secretariat, Shinu and Mr. Many, to please list out all these chat messages, because some of them are very useful, and of course there are some suggestions. And the other one of the things was that they requested that all those who participated should be sent the PPT. So the Secretariat, I'm taking this option to request Secretariat to do that. And now, very briefly, in the vote of thanks, I would like to firstly thank our President, Sharma ji, and also the excellent speakers, Ashish and Krishan, for their excellent talk. And also I would like to thank all the participants to have taken out the time to attend to this, and we would encourage them to please continue their own individual